Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for tuning in this evening for our online Bible study. Let's get into it. I welcome you. If you are new to the study, I'm Pastor Dave St. Aubin, and it's a joy to be with you here this evening. Tonight, we begin our look at the book of Micah. So I invite you to grab your Bibles, open them up to Micah chapter 1, grab something to take some good notes with, grab a beverage, and grab a snack. Let's get into it. Well, again, good evening and welcome, and thanks for tuning in. I do appreciate you being here this evening. Happy Wednesday. Good to be with you here again as we continue our journey through the Bible, one chapter at a time. If you are new to this study, my name is Pastor Dave St. Aubin, and it's a joy to be with you here tonight. We began this study back in September of 2022 with the book of Genesis chapter 1, and we've been making our way through the Bible one chapter at a time. Last night we finished up the book of Jonah, and now we begin a new book, the book of Micah. And this is the next of the minor prophets that we've been looking at. So far we've looked at several. We've looked at Jonah and Amos and Joel and Hosea and Obadiah, and we're going to continue working through these minor prophets. We have a few more left before we complete the Old Testament here in about 7 weeks or so. But the book of Micah, very interesting book. Micah, the name Micah means who is like Yahweh. And that's a very fitting name because Micah is going to preach to people to help them understand what God is like. So we know who the writer of this book is. We know a little bit about where he's from, and we're going to see tonight in chapter 1 that Micah is from the area of Moreshet Gat, and we'll talk about this here in just a little bit. Moreshet Gat was about 25 miles southwest of Jerusalem in Judah, would have been in the foothill area of Judah. We'll see that here tonight. And it was about 6 miles to the northeast of the area known as Lachish. And Lachish was a very important Judean town. It was on a major trade route where a lot of foot traffic would have been going through back and forth. And so there's opportunity here for Micah to minister to a lot of people. Micah, he lived in Moreshet, which was only about a day's walk from Amos's hometown of Tekoa. We saw that in the book of Amos. So it's possible that Micah and Amos knew each other, knew of each other. More than likely, Micah's ministry began after Amos had concluded, and Hosea, and even Isaiah. They would have all lived around the same time, but Micah most likely came after these other three prophets had concluded their ministry. And as we're going to see in verse 1, we have a time frame of when Micah ministered, because in verse 1 we're going to see that he prophesied during the reigns of 3 different kings of Judah, Jotham and Ahaz and Hezekiah, which would have covered the time span of 750 BC into 680 BC. So sometime mid-8th century BC is when Micah would have prophesied. And again, he would have been a contemporary of Amos and Hosea and Isaiah. He would have prophesied to both the northern kingdom Israel and the southern kingdom Judah. In fact, Micah would have witnessed the fall of the northern kingdom Israel to the Assyrians in 722 BC. He would have had a message for the southern kingdom of Judah that he had already prophesied that the northern kingdom would fall. And so his message to the southern kingdom, Judah, was you too are going to be under God's judgment if you continue to break the covenant. That's a big theme throughout Micah, is the covenant through Moses, the Mosaic covenant. And he doesn't use that word specifically in this book, but just we can glean by the way he writes that that's the focus, that the people are breaking the covenant of God, and because that, judgment is going to come on them. If they would follow the covenant, if they would stay faithful to it, then blessing would come. If they continue to break the covenant, then judgment was going to come. Now, I mentioned Micah would have been a contemporary of Isaiah. Isaiah primarily ministered within Jerusalem, within the court of the kings. He would have ministered to the king, to the king's court, to the royalty, to the nobles. Micah would have ministered outside the city, to the commoner. He was primarily a prophet to the poor, to the ordinary Israelite. He was a friend of the oppressed, so to speak. And he's going to focus on true worship, true religion, not conforming to ritual or just practicing righteousness for the sake of doing it. He was going to focus on, again, staying faithful to the will, to the covenant of God. And we're going to see three major messages in these next 7 chapters. It's only 7 chapters long. And each one of these messages begins with the word hear or listen. It's a call to hear. Judgment is going to come. Judgment is imminent. And as I said, he would have prophesied to the northern kingdom, Israel, that judgment was coming, and he would have seen that happen by the Assyrian invasion. He would have also preached to the southern kingdom, Judah, and seen them fall to the Assyrians as well. But as much as this is a book about prophetic coming judgment and punishment, we also see here, as we've seen in some of the other books of the prophets, that there was restoration to follow, and in fact that a remnant would survive these attacks of the Assyrians. And Micah is also a prophetic book that prophesied about the coming Messiah. We're going to see that quite a bit throughout this book. And in fact, we'll see he predicts the coming birthplace, the origin of the Messiah. We'll see that next week in chapter 5. His reign, we'll see that in chapter 4. Micah's going to refer to the Messiah as Israel's king. We'll see that tomorrow in chapter 2. And Matthew quoted from Micah when predicting the birthplace of the Messiah. You'll see that in Matthew 2. He quotes from Micah 5. In Matthew 10, he records Jesus' words about conflict within families. That's a quote out of Micah chapter 7. We'll see a lot of crossover. When we get to the Gospel of Matthew here in a couple months, we're going to see these words from Micah once again. Micah's very beautifully written. He used a lot of different styles of writing. We're going to see a lot of poetry in his writings. We're also going to see a lot of parallelism. He's going to use word plays and puns and probing questions. We're going to see some of the wordplay here tonight. And Micah was very well versed in what we consider to be Old Testament scripture. He would have known the writings of Exodus and Numbers and the Psalms and the Proverbs and Joshua and Deuteronomy. He would have been well versed in these writings as well. So Micah, Who is like Yahweh is what his name means. From Mereshet Got, we're going to look at that here in just a moment. We know when. We're going to see that here in a moment as well. And we know who he's preaching to, primarily the southern kingdom, Judah. But he's prophesying to Israel as a whole, as a nation, to the Israelites. So, lots to look at here tonight. Let's get right into it. Open up your Bibles to Micah chapter 1. If you don't have a Bible with you, not a problem. As always, all the verses will be up here on the screen. And we're going to start with this heading, this superscription that we see in many of the prophetic books. It's just a statement that is written to provide a historical setting of the book. We've seen that in most of these prophets. In fact, we'll see them this type of heading in all of the prophetic books, with the exception of Haggai and Zechariah. So let's start here, Micah chapter 1 with verse 1, and we're going to find a lot about, in this heading, who he is, where he's from, when he ministered. So, verse 1, the word of the Lord that came to Micah of Moreshet. So Micah again means who is like Yahweh. He came from Moreshet. Moreshet is a town in Judah, as I mentioned, about 25 miles southwest of Jerusalem in the foothill area. And what we've seen in some of the other prophets is we see the name of the prophet and then son of. Here we don't see that. We see Micah, a resident of. It's really interesting because normally somebody who was a longtime resident of a town would be described as son of so-and-so from that town, rather than just being from a particular place. So we don't know, at least from this verse, his lineage. We just know who he is. His name is Micah, who is like Yahweh, and he's from this town about 25 miles in the foothills southwest of Jerusalem. And he received this word from the Lord during the reigns of the kings of Judah, Jotham and Ahaz and Hezekiah. So this gives us an idea of the time frame. It dates his ministry between 750 and 690, 685 BC, somewhere in that range, 8th century, 7th century BC prophet. We'll see similar headings, the superscription here, when we get to Zephaniah. We've seen these already in Hosea and Amos. It provides a background. So we know who he is. He's Micah from Moreshet, and when he ministered was sometime mid-8th century BC during the reign of these three kings that overlap, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. And the word he received was a vision concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. Samaria, remember, the capital of the northern kingdom Israel. Jerusalem, the capital of the southern kingdom Judah. This prophetic revelation came to Micah of Moreshet during the reign of these kings regarding the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, which is just representative of the entire nation Israel and all the people in them. So not just the capitals, but the entire land that was known as Israel and the entire people. So these visions, or this vision that was given to Micah, was a visual. He didn't hear it, he saw it. God revealed it to him in a dream, in a vision, whatever it was provided as a visual. The order in which he lists these cities, this vision came concerning Samaria to the north and Jerusalem to the south, is in this order probably because destruction was coming first to Samaria, to the northern kingdom Israel, before this punishment came to the southern kingdom, Judah. So there's the superscription. There's the heading. Micah, who is like Yahweh, from Morasheth, southwest of Jerusalem. It's a visual word from God concerning the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And now I mentioned there are 3 oracles, 3 visions in this book, and we're going to come to the first here, which is this impending judgment on Israel and the future restoration of Israel. And like I said, they all begin with this word "hear," or "listen." It begins with the same imperative. And we hear the judgment, the punishment, but each one is followed by a promise of restoration. What we're going to see here is words of hope follow words of doom, right? And this first message deals with Israel's pending judgment and their future restoration. So the emphasis here is on judgment coming on the northern kingdom. Capital Samaria, the northern kingdom, Israel. Micah's going to predict the fall here of Samaria in chapter 1. And then tomorrow, when we get to chapter 2, we're going to see the reasons for this judgment, and then it's going to be followed by words of blessing and restoration. And the word "here" means everybody is supposed to listen to this warning, and it's going to come as like a courtroom pronouncement from God as judge. We're going to see the charge against the people, right? This is what you are charged with. In verse 2, then we're going to see the punishment that is coming. Here's your sentence. And then the certainty of this coming punishment. We're not going to see the restoration until tomorrow. This is all about the coming punishment. So verse 2, hear, listen, right? That's the first of these messages. Hear, you peoples, all of you. Not just you who live in Samaria, but all of you in the kingdom Israel. Listen, all who live within it. So this is virtually a shout, right? If you remember, Old England or Old New England, like I hear ye, and the ringing of a bell. This is everybody listen up. And this is a courtroom type analogy. It's the clerk of court summoning everybody to pay attention, right? And all rise. The judge is coming in, and we are about to hear the testimony to follow. This is an oracle written in lawsuit form. We've seen these before. This is quite common among the prophets. Sovereign God is about to give witness, testimony against the people. That's you, right? So here, you peoples. The sovereign Lord will bear witness against you, the Lord, from his holy temple. So God's going to come out of his holy temple to give testimony. The word here, holy temple, translates into palace. In other words, it's reference to a throne of judgment. It's God's heavenly throne that he's sitting on, that he's going to come from to pronounce judgment. Verse 3, behold, the Lord is coming from his dwelling place. So the Lord God, he's about to intervene in the affairs of his people. God is not only transcendent above all things, he's intimately involved in the goings on of his people. That's one of the most basic revelations in Old Testament theology, the sovereignty of God. Behold, he comes down, he treads on the heights of the earth. To tread or to trample, it was symbolic of taking ownership of. So here, the divine judge, the divine owner, is coming to lay claim to his land, to his people. To tread on the heights of the earth, or the high places, which is just another word for land, implies that God is going to crush this pagan worship, because remember, these pagan temples were on the high places, on the higher ground of the land. So here the judge is coming to claim ownership of his land, of his people, to trample on these places of idol worship. Verse 4, the mountains melt beneath him, the valleys split apart like wax before the fire, like water rushing down a slope. When God, the God of judgment, when he comes, all the earth, all the mountains are going to split. They're going to melt. They're going to quake before the awesome power of sovereign God. And because God could affect physical creation in such a drastic manner, the people needed to fear him, not to be afraid of him, but to be respectful of who this judge is. And verse 5, all of this is coming because of Jacob's transgression, because of the sins of the people Israel. Michael's using the name Israel to describe both the northern and the southern kingdom. He's using Jacob to reference the people Israel. And so God's intervention is coming because of the sins of the people, their rebellion against sovereign Lord, breaking the covenant. What is the transgression? What is Jacob's transgression? Is it not Samaria? So that just personifies all the wrongdoings of the Israelites. Was it Judah's high place? Is it not Jerusalem? Jerusalem had become a high place for the practice of idolatry. Instead of holy worship at the temple, they were practicing idolatry in these high places. And so these two capital cities, Samaria and Jerusalem, had become leaders in wickedness rather than holiness throughout the entire lands of Israel. And Micah, he likes to use the name Jacob as a title for Israel. He uses Jacob in different ways. Remember, I said there's a lot of parallelism here in Micah. There's a lot of wordplay. So Jacob can mean all of Israel. Jacob can mean the northern kingdom, Israel. When we get to chapter 7, Jacob will mean Jacob, the person himself. But here, it recalls the rebellious nature of Jacob and parallels that with the rebellious nature of the people. That they rebelled against God, much as Jacob as a person rebelled in most of his early life before he wrestled with God. Verse 6. So we see the charge. Therefore, I will make Samaria a heap of rubble, right? This is the vision coming from God to Micah to preach to the people. I will make Samaria a place for planting vineyards. I will pour her stones into the valley, and I will lay bare her foundations. So Israel's capital, Samaria, it stood atop a hill. God is saying, I'm going to make this capital that stands atop this hill a pile of rubble in a valley, right? I'm going to knock it down. In other words, he's not just going to destroy it, he's going to humiliate it. It's going to become not an urban place of populous people. It's going to become a rural place that was only going to be suitable for planting a vineyard. God would topple the stones of the buildings, and they would tumble into the valley below, that he would expose the foundations by destroying the structures within Samaria. And all of this came to fulfillment when Assyria came in and overthrew Samaria in 722 BC. In fact, even today, the foundations of the structures of Samaria, they lie exposed in the ground. It's been completely demolished. This was the will of God. and it was carried out by the Assyrians. Verse 7, God continues. All the idols will be broken into pieces. All the temple gifts will be burned with fire, and I will destroy all of these images. So God's going to smash these false idols, which would prove them to be incapable of defending themselves or the people. God's going to burn the ornaments that the people would offer as gifts within these temples. That's all going to come through fire by the Assyrians that were going to overthrow Samaria. And all these pagan images that the people would craft would be destroyed. Next verse. Since she gathered her gifts from the wages of prostitutes, as the wages of prostitutes, they will again be used. So God's viewing these treasures as the earnings of a prostitute, a harlot, who had been unfaithful to him. It's all a reference to Israel. You have been as though a prostitute being paid for your horrible idolatry. The Israelites committed idolatry, and they committed spiritual adultery, and they committed physical adultery with these temple prostitutes. God would use the Assyrians to come in, destroy all of these gifts, these things that the Israelites had brought into these temples and used for their own idolatrous worship. God's going to destroy them all. And now in the next verses, we see this lament over this judgment. So now the sentence that was just outlined in verses 2 through 7, right? That's what God's saying. Here's your sentence, which was fulfilled by the Assyrians, 722 BC. We're going to see that certifies the doom of idolatrous Judah here in verses 8 through 16, which is tied into the Assyrians coming into the foothills of Judah in 700 BC and destroying them as well. So we see the judgment pronouncement, right? The judge comes in from his throne, pronounces judgment, and now we're going to see the lament over this. And the first part of this lament is the response of Micah. So verse 8. So this is Micah speaking. Because of all this, I will weep and wail. I will go about barefoot and naked. I will howl like a jackal. I will moan like an owl. In view of this coming judgment, Micah is saying he feels compelled to mourn and to wail. He feels compelled to cry. He's going to express his sorrow by going barefoot and by going around naked, which was a common way of expressing grief in this culture. The jackal and the owl, these are nocturnal animals. They lived alone. They were very peculiar for their nocturnal hunting habits, but also for their wailing sounds. And so Micah is saying, I'm going to mourn by going barefoot and naked, and I'm going to mimic these two night creatures that make these screeching sounds. If you've heard an owl screech, right? He's going to mimic them in his wailing. Verse 9, for Samaria's plague is incurable, and it is spread to Judah. We're going to talk about this here in a second. It is reached to the very gate of my people, even to Jerusalem itself. So Samaria, that was just told by God it was going to fall, its infectious nature is now going to spread. This sin and the consequence of this sin is now going to infect Judah, the southern kingdom, even into the capital of Jerusalem. Jerusalem should have been especially holy because of the temple there and God's presence in the temple there. But it had become polluted. It had become infected. And that infection of Samaria was going to spill into Judah and into the holy city Jerusalem. And punishment reached the gates of Jerusalem in 701 BC when Sennacherib of Assyria came in, attacked the city. But what we saw in 2 Kings was that God had helped to turn that invasion back. It wouldn't be until the Babylonians came in that Jerusalem completely fell. But we see this infection spreading. The problem with Samaria was that they were toxic in how they worshipped, and that toxic infection had spread all the way into Judah, all the way into Jerusalem. And now we see Micah's call to the people to respond to this. So he's going to use some very clever word plays in these next verses. And I had shared, he uses a lot of pun, a lot of word play. And he's going to use this word play in this poem, because this is poetry, to describe this desolation God's going to bring on Judah. And how he's going to do that is by selecting all these towns and villages near his own hometown, Moreshet Gat, in the foothills of Judah. And he's going to do this because the names of these cities are very similar to the devastation that is coming, or to the conditions that he's going to describe. So all of these towns that Micah's going to describe, they kind of encircle his hometown of Moreshet Gat. And so these cities, the names of these cities, we're going to see a lot of wordplay here. So let's go through. And again, this is poetry. When you see scripture written like this, in this linear rather than paragraph, it's an indication that it's poetry. So let's look at these 12 cities. And let's look at the pun, the wordplay in these. So tell it not in Gat, weep not in awe. So Micah's urging the Israelites not to report this Assyrian invasion of Jerusalem in Gat. Not even to indicate what's going on there by crying publicly. Why? Why Gat? Gat was a Philistine town. It was an enemy town. So Moreshet is where Micah is from. Moreshet Gat means it's close to Gat. It's close to this enemy Philistine town. So don't go and share this news of Israel's invasion here in Jerusalem. Don't go and share it with the Philistines, because if you do, that's going to encourage the Philistines to go in and attack as well. Gat means it means tell town, or weep town. So the play here, the pun, the play on words is tell it not in tell town, or weep not in weep town. And you're going to see this in these cities, this word play. In Beit Ophrah, roll in the dust. So in these cities in Israel that were around Moreshet, like Gat, which was a Philistine city, and then Bet Ophrah. Ophrah means house of dust. So the inhabitants should roll in the dust, in the excuse me, in the house of dust. So in Beit Ophrah, roll in the dust. In the house of dust, roll in the dust. All that means is express your distress, your lament, because this is happening. Next one, verse 11. Pass by naked and in shame, you who live in Shaphir. Shaphir means beautiful or pleasant. So the residents of Pleasant would become the opposite of pleasant. They would be shamefully naked when this invasion comes. So you see the wordplay. Next verse. Those who live in Zanan will not come out. The inhabitants of Zanan Zanan is translated, it sounds like a Hebrew word that means come out. So the inhabitants of come out should not come out. more specifically, they won't be able to come out. They're not going to be able to escape this coming invasion. So tell not in tell town, right? Don't tell the Philistines. Roll in the dust, in house of the dust. Uh, be in shame, you who are in the land of pleasant, and you won't be able to come out, you who are in the land of come out. Next one, Beit Ezel is in mourning. It no longer protects you. Beit Ezel means house of removal. These people are going to lament because the Lord would remove his support, right? In the house of removal, God has removed support. These are all puns, but it's meant to express to the people that this judgment is coming. Verse 12, those who live in Marot writhe in pain, waiting for relief, because disaster has come from the Lord, even to the gate of Jerusalem. So the residents of Marot. Marot is very close to a Hebrew word that sounds like another word translated as bitterness. So the residents of this town would become weak as they waited for relief to come. Their expectation would become bitter. God's not going to come to help them. Calamity is coming to their gates. So those who live in bitter will become bitter. Verse 13, you who live in Lachish, and I mentioned Lachish was on this, it was very close to this area. It was on a major trade route. So a lot of population here. You who live in Lachish, harness fast horses to the chariot. Micah uses the people of Lachish, which this town was known for its horses, to hitch a team, which in Hebrew is rekish, hitch a team of horses to a chariot to escape the enemy. But they're not going to be able to escape because you are where the sin of daughter Zion began. The transgressions of Israel were found in you. So you who live in the town of horses, hitch up your horse to a chariot, but you're not going to be able to escape because you are the center of the sin of idolatry. You have led Jerusalem like a horse leads a chariot into idolatry. Again, it's all wordplay. Verse 14, therefore you will give parting gifts to Morashet Gat. So Jerusalem is going to give Morashet Gat as a portion of a parting gift to the invader, a plunder. Morashet means the possession of. So the king of Jerusalem, of Judah, is not going to be able to prevent the Assyrian king from taking Morashet Gat captive. You who are possession of are going to become possession of somebody else. Next verse. The town of Akzib will prove deceptive to the kings of Israel. The people of Akzib would become deceitful. The deceitful word in Hebrew is akzab. So the Akzib will become akzab to the kings of Israel. They're not going to be able to fend off the enemy, and they would become deceitful. You who live in the land of deceit would be deceptive. Verse 15, and I will conquer against you who live in Marashah. The nobles of Israel will flee to Adullam. So God's going to bring onto the inhabitants of Marashah, which means possessor, one who is going to take possession of them. The possessor would become the possessed of somebody else. And the nobles of Israel, which means the leaders of Israel, would flee with shame for safety to Adullam, which is where David fled to in 1 Samuel 22 when he was under shame, when he was being chased. And the point of all this is the situation is going to be so bad that the heir to the nation, right? The glory of the nation Israel, out of the line of David, the members of the royal family, they're going to have to flee in terror to these most remote of hiding places, Adullam. Verse 16. So shave your head in the morning for the children in whom you delight. So Micah's calling on the people of Judah. Shave your hair. Cut it very short. Why? Because that is symbolic of sorrow over the departure of children, either their literal children or the nobles, right? The people of Israel. It's a sign of grief of them going into exile. And this baldness, shaving your head, it's all symbolic of shame and of helplessness. Make yourself as bald as the vulture or the eagle, depending on your translation. It really means eagle. For they will go from you into exile. The eagle, from a distance, because its head is white, appears to be bald. So it's just reference of shame and humiliation. And so these verses 10 through 16, they begin with words that recall David's lament when Saul died, and they end with the names or with the name of the cave where David fled to when Saul was hunting him down. And those were very dark moments in the life of David. And those two moments, when he's fleeing from Saul and when Saul dies, they kind of form a backdrop, a very dark, gloomy backdrop to the descriptions of the fall of all these cities that Micah just spoke of. And even though David is never mentioned directly here, this is all reference to the fall of the kingdom, the kingdom of David, where the lineage was supposed to be forever, right? The kingdom of David was supposed to last forever. David eventually had to bow down in humiliation and hide. And that's what's happening here to Judah. It's a prophecy that just like that happened to him, you're going to go into a very dark place. All these cities are going to crumble, and you're going into exile. And just like David ended up in Adullam, the glory of Israel, Jerusalem, is going to end up in Adullam. And all of this prophecy found its fulfillment in 721 BC against the northern kingdom, Israel, and Samaria, and in 701 BC against Judah. And that is the book of Micah, chapter 1. And so we are well underway here. And again, this is just the mention of the coming judgment, right? The king had proclaimed his judgment and was making his sentence to come upon the people. Tomorrow, we're going to look at chapter 2, and before we see the restoration, we are going to see the sins of the southern kingdom, Judah. And depending on time-wise how we are looking, we may look at chapter 3 as well. But tomorrow, we'll look at least at chapter 2. But thank you for being here this evening. I do pray that this has been a help to you, and I appreciate you being here as we continue this journey. We are in a new book. It's an exciting book, so I look forward to going through it with you. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Stay safe and stay healthy, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Till then, take care, and God bless. Bye-bye.